You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What's up, everybody? I'm EJ Kissel. This is KCSN Update, our daily cheat show and podcast here at KC Sports Network. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. Hope everyone had a fantastic post-holiday break. Always a little different to get things going after the time off, and especially for us with our kids. They're actually excited to be back in school and be around their friends, but hope you all had a great break. It's Friday, so as per usual, I'm joined by Pro Football Focus's Trevor Sikkema, who is going to talk a little key matchups. Obviously, we'll react to the NFL's decision there, Trevor, on the AFC playoff seeding.
Yes. Lucky me being able to sort through all of this new playoff scenario mess. But no, it's going to be good to be able to get all these things out, talk about all the scenarios, and then, of course, talk about the key matchups as well.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll get into it, but Chiefs fans, I thought the NFL actually did a pretty good job figuring out a way to make it as fair as possible in a really bad situation with everything going on. And obviously, we're continuing to hope and pray for more great news from Damar Hamlin. But we got to talk through this because the NFL made decisions. The NFL owners are voting on it. Really curious to get your thoughts. But first, here's a quick update and round through the headlines going on with the Chiefs right now. We've got the latest injury report that came out for the Chiefs now that game is on Saturday against the Raiders. The official injury report comes out a day earlier. Normally comes out on Friday, but a few Chiefs, 4 Chiefs listed as questionable going into this game on Saturday. That's left guard Joe Thuney dealing with an ankle. Cornerback L'Jarius Sneed is listed as questionable with the hip. Has been a limited participant at practice this week. Wide receiver Sky Moore, who we saw injure his hand. They showed it on the broadcast last week. Did not practice, and he is out for this game on Saturday. McCole Hardman, listed with a pelvis, has been limited all week. He is officially listed as questionable. He has not played in a while, so it would be good to see McCole get back out on the field, but something to pay attention to as the inactives come out about 90 minutes before kickoff. And then kicker Harrison Butker dealing with those back spasms. Was listed as a full participant at practice on Friday, but is listed as questionable going into this game. So now I'm gonna read through what the NFL put out regarding the AFC playoff scenarios, and it's quite a bit of information, but it'll give Trevor and I some context here to get through it. So the NFL had announced that the Week 17 game between the Buffalo Bills and Cincinnati Bengals would be canceled and not be resumed and listed as a no contest. And then here's what they have as far as the key factors in arriving at that decision. And then not playing the Buffalo-Cincinnati game to its conclusion will have no effect on which clubs qualify for the postseason. No club would qualify for the postseason, and no club would be eliminated based on the outcome of that game. It would require postponing the start of the playoffs for 1 week, thereby affecting 14 different teams that qualified for postseason play. And also making the decision prior to Week 18 is consistent with their competitive advantage principles and enables all clubs to know that playoff possibilities prior to playing the final weekend of regular season games. So that's where the NFL was coming from in making this kind of list that, again, NFL owners will be voting on. Trevor, curious to get your thoughts here in a sec also on this, because I'd be really surprised if this was the first time NFL owners were seeing this proposal as it's being voted on, as it kind of got leaked and put out to the press and the media on Thursday night. But here are the scenarios. Scenario 1, Buffalo and Kansas City both win or tie, and obviously it's talking about games this weekend. A Buffalo versus Kansas City championship game would be played at a neutral site. A lot of confusion for Chiefs fans on social media last night. At the end of the day, the only real scenario, if the Chiefs win on Saturday, that they're not playing, that they wouldn't have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, is if Buffalo, who also needs to win their game this weekend, makes it to the AFC Championship game. That game would be played at a neutral site. The other opportunities or situations in which the Chiefs would not play at home for an AFC title game all have to do if the Chiefs lose to the Raiders. So the Chiefs beat the Raiders. The only chance, or the only way in which they would not have home field for the AFC title game is if the Bills would make it, because Cincinnati has one more loss. So that's the way that played out. But scenario 2, Buffalo and Kansas City both lose and Baltimore wins or ties. A Buffalo versus Kansas City championship game would be at a neutral site. So again, that's saying if the Chiefs lose to the Raiders. So we'll leave it right there. That's kind of, for Chiefs fans, that's kind of where we're coming from with this. Trevor, curious your thoughts, because from a Chiefs fan perspective, I feel like they did the best they could, but we also compared to Cincinnati, didn't necessarily come out of this as unscathed as it seems like the Bengals have. What are your thoughts on how it all played out?
Yeah, it was really tough for the Bengals, and obviously, like everybody was saying in the days leading up, first and foremost, everybody was like, "Hey, let's make sure that DeMar Hamlin's going to be okay," because if it could have been other things, then we would have been having a much worse conversation. So we're having a better conversation about this, but it's hard to imagine a team wouldn't have gotten a little bit screwed either way. Like no matter how you would, because you even look at how the rule was stated, and it was just like, hey, if there's a canceled game, you basically the rules stay the same. Division opponents are up against head to head if there's some sort of tie, or if the win percentage is higher for one team, they simply win the division. And so even that would have kind of not been fair, right? Because you go to the Bengals. And the rule for the Bengals right now, at least the way that I interpret it, is they've won the AFC North, and if they lose to the Ravens in Week 18, then if they play in the wild card in that first round, if they end up matching up, then it's just going to be a coin flip for who ends up hosting the game. Now, Bengals fans are kind of mad about that because they're like, how is that possible? You're giving us the AFC North championship. You're making the schedule more difficult for us next year because we won the AFC North, and yet you're not guaranteeing us home field advantage for at least one round in the wild card. But if you look at it, Buffalo would have won that game in Kansas City, if Buffalo would have won that game in Cincinnati, and if the Ravens would beat the Bengals, they'd have the same exact record, and the Ravens would be 2-0 against the Bengals this year, which means that the Ravens would have won the division. So it's almost like they're getting gifted the division, but they're kind of being punished for it. The only part of this that I really think I don't agree with the most, though, is if Cincinnati and Buffalo both win this weekend, and they match up against each other in the divisional round, it appears as though Buffalo will host that game no matter what. And that, to me, is the most unfair thing about this, because there was a path where Cincinnati beats Buffalo this past Monday night, and then that game would have been in Cincinnati if they were to have gotten the 2 seed in all of this. So you almost take away their control of destiny there. And if you're going to make it a neutral site game for the AFC championships, which I don't totally hate, I feel like you kind of also would have needed to make it a neutral site game between the Bengals and the Bills, or at least do the coin flip thing, because both of them had a chance to host that game, and now only one team really has a chance to host that game. So those are my thoughts with it in a very complicated situation.
I want to get your thoughts on this, because I don't know this, and this is just kind of putting together how organized the NFL is, and that I would be really surprised if the first time, at least from the Bengals, Bills, and Chiefs, and probably Ravens perspective, because those are the teams that are kind of affected the most with what's going on with the AFC playoff seeding, is that I'd be surprised if at least the ownership groups or owners of those 4 teams hadn't kind of talked through or seen this already. I know that the NFL owners, and by the time you're listening to this, depending upon what time this show gets out, though, that information may already be out there as far as what happened with the voting. I'd be surprised if the first time the owners saw it was last night when it got put out to the press. So almost seems like they put it out to see how people react, and then fix anything, because they don't have time. They have to fix it before the end of that meeting on Friday. They have to come to a decision on how this is going to play out, because the Chiefs play less than 24 hours after their meeting, or right about 24 hours after this meeting's taking place. Right. So, and it is taking place virtually. So, they got to get to answers. I'd be surprised if it wasn't already kind of put out there. There was no good way for the NFL to do anything where there wasn't going to be somebody or some team that felt like they got the wrong end of it. I hadn't thought through some of the ways they're doing this with neutral sites and all of that. I feel like, again, it's easy to say from our point of view, because we win, we take care of business, we'll be okay unless we play Buffalo. I know some Chiefs fans are really upset about that game being played in a neutral site. I go back to, I understand how the rules are written, but Buffalo beat Kansas City. So that game being played at a neutral site isn't right. You had a chance. There's got to not be it's not a punishment to the Chiefs that some people are taking it that way. But thoughts on the NFL? I mean, am I out to lunch here and thinking that owners have already probably seen this, and it was a way of the NFL getting this information out, kind of seeing the reaction, if there was something that they missed, or just some real strong public pushback that they saw last night after it got released, that they can discuss that and kind of assess that going into this meeting to get to a final decision?
Yeah, I mean, let's be real about it. They've been talking about it since Monday night, right? Even before they knew exactly what was going to happen, they were coming up with contingency plans. There is so much money on the line with where you play these games and how you play these games and at what date you play these games and all that kinds of stuff. And of course, you know, I know a lot of people don't necessarily give the NFL a lot of benefit of the doubt, but like, I do think that they were handling this situation very delicately with DeMar, and they wanted that to unfold first and foremost. And really, there's a reason why we're getting this news and information after we've kind of heard what the prognosis of DeMar has been and how he's improved. And that's obviously the most important thing. But yeah, they've been talking about this since Monday night. In fact, the people in the league who are making decisions on this, especially at the main NFL level, I don't know if they've slept for the last 3 days trying to figure out a scenario that would work the most. And also, I 100% agree with you. They've been in contact with all of the owners of all 32 NFL teams. They're not just seeing this for the first time like we are. There's no possible way. And in fact, I think that when you saw the immediate outcry from certain owners and certain representatives of teams immediately, because they weren't just seeing this for the first time. They weren't like, okay, hold on, let me analyze this. They already knew whether they liked it or they were mad about it. That's why we saw immediate reaction from them. So no, I don't think it would have been possible for them to have seen what the NFL put out yesterday and then vote on it correctly the way that they needed to this morning. They've already seen it. They already kind of know which way they're voting. And the vote, I think the NFL is hoping, is quick. Now, I think, what is it? They got to get 24 out of 32 owners to approve of it in order for it to go into effect. So it's a big number, but I do kind of think they will.
In the NFL, the scenario in which it's probably the most unfair is the one that you mentioned right off the top. And it's interesting regarding the Bengals Ravens coin flip situation and kind of the division championship, and that the one pushback you saw, and it came out immediately, was from the Bengals. A VP for the Bengals kind of came out and said, like, or it was an internal memo was leaked saying, hey, we don't think that this is fair, because it was probably the most unfair part of that. And when they had those decisions over the last several days, that was probably mentioned quite a bit. It was like, this is the best of a bad situation that we have, where the Bengals immediately came out and kind of said, like, hey, we know this stuff coming out right now is not fair, and we're going to show you that we did push back before that narrative starts to build. And Bengals fans like, hey, why did we let this isn't fair? It's like Bengals respond immediately, so they know at least they're pushing back on that one area. See what the owners decide today. But those are the headlines right now. Again, Chiefs injury report, 4 players listed as questionable, and Sky Moore not playing in this game against the Raiders on Saturday. And then obviously with the AFC playoff seeding will be the news throughout Friday as far as how that vote went down, what NFL owners have decided. We're going to get Trevor's key matchup for the game between the Raiders and the Chiefs here in just a second. But now a quick word from our friends over at DraftKings, the presenting sponsor of KCSN Update. The fans, the tradition, the glory. There's nothing more thrilling than college football, and it all comes down to the national championship game happening on Monday. My go-to for betting is DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps. TCU and Georgia, that's the game Monday night. It's the favorite that's been the favorite all season long against the underdog that's really taken the college football landscape by storm this year in TCU. Personally, I'm going to say loyal to the Big 12 and root for TCU in this one. But right now, new customers can bet just $5 on college football and get $200 in free bets instantly, win or lose. Plus, everyone can combine multiple bets for a bigger payout with DraftKings same-game parlays. I love the DraftKings app because it's easy to navigate and I can find the plays I'm looking for quick and easy. I love to bet simple on my same-game parlays. I pick an over-under. I pick a team that I like. I always struggle taking the under just because I love some action. But you got to download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code KCSN. New customers can bet just $5 on college football and get $200 in free bets instantly. That's code KCSN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See the show notes for details. All right, we're talking a little Chiefs and Raiders now. Key matchup with Pro Football Focus's Trevor Sikkema. Trevor, as we have done this every week, there seems to be consistencies with the different things that we talk about. And when you talk about the Raiders, even without Derek Carr, they still got some offensive weapons. One in particular that can take over a game if you're not careful about the way that you go up against them. I know talking key matchups, you want to start with that Raiders wide receiver, their big move in the offseason, and Davante Adams.
Yeah, I mean, key number one has to be what happens with Davante Adams, right? Because the entire offense just moves all the way through him. It doesn't even matter who's playing quarterback, as we've seen last week, what Jarrett Stidham was able to do. You just throw it up to 17 and he'll make magic happen. There are so many different great wide receivers in the NFL, but I truly believe that Davante Adams has mastery over the position better than any receiver in the NFL when it comes to release and footwork and hands and concentration and concentrated catches and route running and just everything, man. He is unbelievable at it. And that's, of course, where the Raiders are going to run their offense through. Look, I know a lot of people want to look back at last week, and we'll look at last week plenty when the Raiders almost upset what feels like the best team in the NFC in the San Francisco 49ers. And they go, how did they do this with Jarrett Stidham? I do believe that either a drastic change at quarterback or a drastic change at head coach really does have this almost slingshot of positive effect on a team the immediate week after. Now, some people go, oh, is that because they don't have any tape on these guys? Or is it like extra motivation, extra focus, whatever it is? It just seems to happen all the time. So I'm not really counting on another superhuman effort from Jarrett Stidham again this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. But if we do get it, it's going to come in the form of somewhere between 13 to 17 targets, double-digit catches, over 150 yards, a touchdown or two from Davante Adams. Like that's just how it's going to happen. Darren Waller looked great last week as well, getting in on the offense, and Jarrett Stidham was spreading it around plenty, but it started and ended with how Davante Adams was able to play. And so this is a game where I think a lot of people are going to look at it on paper and say, oh, yeah. Especially, like when you're looking at the playoff scenarios, it's like, oh, if the Chiefs win in week 18, if this, if that. A lot of people are looking at this game against the Raiders and saying, all right, Kansas City's going to win. The key matchup has to be that if there is a reason why Kansas City loses outside of being catastrophic with turnovers, it's the fact that Davante Adams went off. And what happened in the earlier matchup that they had this season, Davante Adams went off and they almost lost. So I think that that's just where the conversation always has to start. It's an obvious one, but Davante is that good of a player. It's all about him.
Yeah, last time these two teams met back in week 6, Chiefs win 30-29. It's the infamous Chris Jones sack fumble play that the NFL started talking about. It was around the same time as the Tom Brady getting thrown down and all the conversations regarding protecting quarterbacks and all that. But yeah, to your point, Davante Adams only had 3 catches in the first matchup, but 124 yards and 2 touchdowns, continuing to go off. It'll be great, again, a great test for the young defensive backs. We talked about it all year for the Chiefs, but Trent McDuffie, those guys that are going to face the Jamar Chase, the Gabe Davises, the Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, all those guys that either the Bengals, the Bills have, the Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, like whoever they end up going against, they're going to have some big time wide receivers that they're going to be going up against. And Davante Adams, obviously a huge test. Curious to get your thoughts. To your point, I was really surprised. We had to pick like one of the 3 most surprising performances so far this season across the entire NFL. How the Raiders performed last week against the Niners completely surprised me. They basically do away with Derek Carr in what I thought was a pretty disrespectful way, considering how much he's meant to that organization. And that's hard for me to say as a Chiefs fan because I despise the Raiders, but feel like he's deserved better if this is the end of the road for Derek Carr. Nothing ends well, but feel like they could take care of him a little bit better than they are right now. Knowing Denzel Perriman got placed on IR, Chandler Jones got placed on IR. Everything that we've heard about Josh McDaniels because of his time in Denver and just being kind of aware, never seemed like the coach that's going to rally all his guys to push through the end of a season. Maybe that's not fair, but we kind of made that point with Lovie Smith and the Texans. Like these young guys are playing really hard for him. There's no quitting them, all those things. Really surprised how well the Raiders came out and played. But I've got one stat for you before we close up this key matchup. Trevor, our Joseph Hefner, our sports data analytics guy, did some research on the Chiefs and how they kind of play down to opponents. So they don't necessarily just go out and take care of business when they're playing teams that they should beat. And that I think it was 19 games in which the Chiefs going into it had a win probability between 80 and 100%. So games in which like, hey, the Chiefs are going to win this game. It's just a matter of by how much. The games in which they were favored to or win probability between 80, I think it was 81 and 100%. I think there was 19 of those games. the Chiefs only covered the spread 49% of the time in those games. So it's quantifying when the Chiefs are going to win and you know they're going to blow them out and do all of that. They're only taking care of business in terms of the way Vegas looks at it 49% of the way. So for Chiefs fans are like, we always play down. There's a quantifiable way of explaining how you feel in those games. And again, this game on Saturday is another one of those games where Chiefs fans feel like, hey, we should take care of business. We should go out there and play well. I know the last game, Chiefs won by 1 point. Seeing how the Raiders performed last week, even with Jarrett Stidham, even without those guys defensively not playing, going to be a tough one. And obviously to your key matchup, stopping or slowing down Devontae Adams is a huge one. So Trevor, nice key matchup right there.